John would go through these periods of feeling better, getting off his medication, go into that destructive spiral, and then start to become psychotic. And the next thing he would disappear and become homeless. And that's when I'd get on the streets of D.C., riding around the streets of D.C., literally looking for my brother. And, one time I found him sitting on a wall at DuPont Circle with nothing on, the middle of the summer, with nothing on but a pair of jeans, no shirt, no shoes, no socks, just sitting there. I don't know how I found him, only by the grace of God, and got him into a hospital. And I was always able to save him until the last time.
Welcome to Beyond Theory, a podcast powered by Metals Behavioral Healthcare that brings you in-depth conversations with firsthand insights from the front lines of mental health and addiction recovery. I'm Dominic Lawson. Roughly 1 in 4 adults suffers from a diagnosable mental disorder each year, according to Johns Hopkins Medicine. And for relatives of those sufferers, it can be a stressful endeavor when trying to help. Victor Brick, co-founder of the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation, says that his brother, John, who died from complications of schizophrenia, is the reason he advocates for mental health resources for all. Let's get out of the abstract and see how this applies in the real world. It's time to go beyond theory.
My name is Victor Brick, and I am the founder and the chairman of the board of the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation. I am also the founder and the CEO of Planet Fitness Growth Partners, which is the largest privately held Planet Fitness franchisee in the Planet Fitness Health Club chain.
Victor, thank you so much for coming on the Beyond Theory podcast. We really appreciate your time.
Oh, it's an honor and a privilege, and thank you for having me.
Of course. So just kind of share with us your background, if you would, Victor.
Yeah, my background is, like many people, started in one direction and ended up in another. I started in as an educator, the physical education and coaching, basketball, actually. And one thing led to another, and the next thing you know, I'm in the fitness industry. And it is quite fortuitous that a lot of what I learned as a physical educator, because I have my master's degree in exercise physiology, related to fitness. And I always knew that we were in wellness, not fitness. We were in health. And that developed into a interest in mental health because of my brother, John. And so now we are still, my wife and I, who was a nurse, so it was a perfect combination of a nurse and a exercise physiologist getting into fitness, and then it evolving into wellness and specifically mental health. So we still are in the health club industry, own a lot of health clubs around the world, around the country, and in Australia. But our main legacy, we hope, will be the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation.
You created the John W. Brick Foundation as a result of losing your brother to complications with a mental illness. But before you share some of those struggles John was having, just kind of share with us, for our audience, who was John? What kind of person was he? You often say he was the most talented of the Brick siblings.
John, and this is often the case, unfortunately, with mental health issues and mental illness. John was one of these, he was a great writer, and one of those phrases that I remember was marvelously gifted and tragically flawed. That was John. Marvelously gifted, tragically flawed. He was a great athlete. He was my oldest brother, the oldest of 5 siblings. He was a great athlete, a good-looking kid, smart as a whip. I mean, literally IQ tests in the genius range, which he would flaunt and tell you at every turn. But he was never comfortable in his own skin. And sometimes that can be salutogenic, or it could be just a frame of mind. But in his case, it was also pathological. I mean, he had schizophrenia. It wasn't that he just, quote, had poor self-esteem. But the bottom line is that so many people suffer from that they don't realize how talented they are. And for John, he was never good enough. No matter what he did, he was never good enough. And again, having schizophrenia, he was prone to serious bouts of mental health issues. But he was my hero. He was also my hero. He's the oldest brother. He protected me growing up. My mother's Filipino. My father's American or U.S., European, and they met during World War II. And so we came from a mixed marriage, Asian American marriage, right after World War II. And we grew up in Hawaii. And Hawaii, of course, was the center of a lot of the conflict that started the war, quite frankly, Pearl Harbor. So John, even in Hawaii, faced racial issues and discrimination. And And as did I, especially when we moved to Washington, D.C. I was the only kid of color in my class. But I had my older brothers, John and Merrill, to help protect me and to stand up for me at times. John didn't have anybody, so he was often the brunt of racial discrimination at the time, and things that I believe had a lasting effect on him. So over time, what we thought was just what would you say, overactive or hyperactive kid, we realized that he had some serious clinical issues. And we tried everything that we could as a family to help him, quote, become adjusted, and pulled him out of one high school and put him in a small private school and sent him to a boarding school. And then we realized he needed hospitalization, and we sought out the best hospitals in the world. Thank goodness there were quite a few of them in the Baltimore, Washington area where we live. But his condition just continued to deteriorate, and over time it became severe, where he would disappear from home, and he would be able to function, and he would end up homeless on the streets of D.C. And those are the times that I had to go find him and bring him back, and we had to put him in a hospital again. And it just was a vicious cycle that he got into, based to a great extent on how they were treating him and on the medication.
You mentioned a lot of times some of the struggles he had, and one of those struggles was kind of this cycle between taking his medicine and not taking his medicine. Kind of talk about that a little bit, Victor.
Again, anyone that's had family or friends that have serious mental health issues know that often experience the same thing we did, and that is this vicious cycle of an individual feeling, having a episode, a mental illness episode, which requires institutionalization and hospitalization. And the medication would stabilize the person, in this case, my brother, and would get him lucid to where he was in control of his faculties and could think and function, but which would also make him physically feel very badly. And also, because he was lucid, he would now realize that what it was doing to him. He wasn't able to function like his normal self, and it was just affecting him physically. And because he was stable and smart enough to realize what the medication was doing to him, he would think that he was okay and didn't need it anymore. So he'd get off his medication, and then he would go back, of course, start to spiral back into this episodic period of mental illness. In John's case, it would be he'd become delusional and psychotic, and quite frankly, a danger to himself and others. And that would require, of course, again, severe intervention of medication as opposed to a manageable dose or a absorbable dose on his part, moderate dose. And the vicious cycle would start all over again. And that's because they had nothing else. Even today, the majority of the way people treat mental health, medication, psychoanalysis, and institutionalization. In terms of the, quote, medical establishment, what else do they do? What else is there? Those are the three pillars of mental illness intervention, and that is psychoanalysis, medication, and institutionalization. And quite frankly, they employ that even in mild cases. And this is where the John W. Briggs Mental Health Foundation comes in, because I truly believe that if my brother was put on a well-rounded program, when he was stable, he could function with a very minimal amount of medication, or maybe no medication. Maintenance program. That's what I was looking for. I was looking for the word, a maintenance program of medication, not a intervention or a recovery amount. And you know that taking some of these medications is like drinking out of a fire hose. If you've never done it, it's like drinking out of a fire hose. You're physically, your heart's racing, your mind's racing. You're just not yourself. It's like having a really bad cold all the time. You're just totally out of sync, and it makes you feel physically. It makes you feel horrible, and it is not sustainable. And it wasn't sustainable with John.
And that leads us to, the foundation that you created with your brother John's namesake, the John W. John W. Briggs Foundation kind of led to that action. And now you have a report that kind of speaks to some new findings. Kind of talk about the foundation a little bit in that report, if you don't mind, Victor.
Sure, but before I do, I just want to explain a little bit exactly what the tipping point was in order for Len and I to get involved with it, start the John W. Briggs Mental Health Foundation.
Of course.
And that was that John would go through these periods of feeling better, getting all this medication, go into that destructive spiral, and then start to become psychotic. And the next thing he would disappear and become homeless. And that's when I'd get on the streets of D.C., riding around the streets of D.C., literally looking for my brother. And, one time I found him sitting on a wall at DuPont Circle with nothing on, the middle of the summer, with nothing on but a pair of jeans, no shirt, no shoes, no socks, just sitting there. I don't know how I found him, only by the grace of God, and got him into a hospital. And I was always able to save him until the last time. And over a period of years, John's condition worsened to the point where we couldn't keep him in the house with our parents because we thought he was could be a danger to them. So we put him in a trailer park in Florida near my parents. And he began to retreat from society, and including the family. And he also started to avoid all modern appliances because he felt he had to do penance for his sins. How else could he be so cursed by this stigma, not the stigma, but this mental health? Oh, he got rid of the television, he got rid of the air conditioner, and he got rid of the refrigerator. And when he got rid of the air conditioner, that was the final thing, because you're in Florida in the middle of the summer. And when my dad found him, my dad went to pick him up for his doctor's visit, and a weekly doctor's visit. My dad found him on the floor of his trailer home. He had passed, of course, and it was 110 degrees in there. And we didn't know whether he passed from heart attack or from heat stroke or what, but we just knew that John was gone. So at the funeral, the very next week, it was one of the saddest affairs I'd ever attended. The only people there were the immediate family. And here, this talented individual, it was as if his life didn't matter. And there was nobody there to mourn him except the immediate family and my parents. And that's when Len and I said, this is how John's going to be remembered. We're going to make sure that his life made a difference. And we started the John W. Briggs Mental Health Foundation so that others would have to go through what we went through. And the focus of the goal of the John W. Briggs Mental Health Foundation is to change the way the world treats mental health. And the vision, our purpose and our vision, is to have salutogenic processes such as exercise, nutrition, and mind-body practice. And salutogenic means holistic and light and lifestyle. So salutogenic processes such as exercise, nutrition, and mind-body practices integrated as an essential part of the treatment of mental illness and the promotion of mental wellness. It's not the only part. It's not the answer. We're not saying that there isn't a role for medication, institutionalization, psychoanalysis, but it's a continuum. And there are times when that's necessary, but there are other times when the emphasis should be on salutogenic processes so that they never get to where they need that serious intervention. So that's really what the John W. Briggs Mental Health Foundation is all about. And you asked about the study, did you, Dominic?
Yes, I did.
So because of that, here's the challenge. The challenge is, well, that all sounds well and good, but does it work? That's what the medical profession is asking. And the answer to them right now is no. We have no, how can you quantify it? And here's the problem with the medical community in the United States, and you see it with Corona. You see it. The Corona is the best example of it, and that is everybody has their own opinion. And people aren't sharing research, and people are challenging each other's studies. There's as many different ways that people think you should treat Corona as there are states in the United States. And so we thought it was necessary to collect and collate. We do three things at John W. Briggs. We fund and promote research. We create programs and services, and we are a collaborative hub which works with other organizations in the field of mental health and distributes information and helps to create synergies between other like-minded groups. So we thought that we could do this landmark study, and then the medical community would embrace it and change the way they treat mental health, and they would start to incorporate these holistic and lifestyle approaches. But what we realized was that one study isn't enough. They have to be overwhelmed by the volume of data and research, and that it's probably not going to come from the medical community. It's going to be a ground-up swell where the medical community is forced, conventional, and it's not just medical community, conventional treatment, traditional institutions are going to be forced to accept the fact that there are other ways to treat mental health. And so we think that information and research, evidence-based research, is a big part of this. So the study you're referring to is the Move Your Mental Health report. And we collated over 1,000 studies, and we rated them according to the discipline. There's Qigong, there's yoga, there's high-intensity interval training, there's cardio training, there's strength training, there's nutrition. And we didn't do nutrition, but we will do that next. The study was more for movement-related and physical fitness related, including mind-body disciplines. And we rated them according to their efficacy and to their peer review rating and to their evidence-based findings. And it is the first study of its kind that we know about, and certainly the largest, that has basically gathered or collated, organized all the research and data out there into an irrefutable volume of research as to how these methods affect mental health. And now our challenge is to begin to promote this to anyone and everyone and anyone that's involved in the treatment of mental health or suffering from mental health. For instance, you could go to this report. If you had a brother or a sister or a son or a daughter, you could go to this report and look up different types of movement activities like biking, like hiking, like swimming, and see how it relates to mental health and see whether or not it's effective. It would be effective in the case of the condition that you're trying to help improve. We don't want people to play doctor for sure, but we do want people to start to become a little bit more responsible for their own health, mental health and well-being, and for the mental health and well-being of those that they love and that they are helping to give care for.
Victor, I think that's very powerful, and I'm pretty sure our audience would agree, because it allows for that agency for you to take more control over your mental health as opposed to waiting for a doctor and things of that nature. So I appreciate that response.
Well, if I could elaborate a little bit, Dominic, on that concept.
Yeah.
Because there's a couple of philosophies we have that we're trying to get pushed into the mainstream, and we want everybody in society. And I'm not just talking about the United States, and I'm not just talking about mental health. I'm talking about health care worldwide, and each of you out there listening. And there's this thing called self-care, this new concept of self-care, and this concept of health care. So think of a circle. And you've seen the yin and the yang circle, where part of the circle's black and part of the circle's white. And there's a little white in the black, and there's a little black in the white. You know what I'm talking about, Dominic? That the yin and yang symbol?
Yes, I do.
Think of the black as self-care. Self-care is exactly what it says. You take care of yourself. Think of the white as health care. The health care is where the health and medical community takes care of you. You've got cancer, you're going to spend a lot more time over in the healthcare part than the self-care part. But there's going to be remember, there's some black in the white and some white in the black. There's a lot of things you can do for cancer on your own. Do not abdicate everything to the healthcare community. On the reverse side, you've got depression. Do not abdicate the treatment of that depression solely to the medical and the health community. Take responsibility for yourself to find out what you can do and what you can help others to do, as I said, that you're helping. And knowing that, of course, there will be some health care in that. So think self-care, health care, and it's a combination of the two, and assume responsibility to a great extent for your own health. I don't know about you, Dominic, but my mother would never do anything her doctor didn't tell her to do. And that's one of the problems with my brother. My parents would not listen to anybody but the medical community. If I were to tell him that he needs to eat better, he shouldn't be doing this, he should reduce inflammation, he should be exercising more, and should be meditating. They didn't want to hear it. Mom, you shouldn't be taking that much drugs. Let's try some of these other. They didn't want to hear it. And that mentality is archaic and outdated and, quite frankly, destructive. And it's all in balance, and assume a great deal of responsibility for your own self-care, as well as seeking out the professionals for healthcare.
Where can we get a copy of this report, Victor, if we wanted to check it out for ourselves?
You can go to the John W. Brick Foundation.com, johnwbrickfoundation.com, And you can go under resources and you'll see Move Your Mental Health Report. You click it and that report would be on there.
Thank you. We have many clinicians and aspiring clinicians in our audience, so I'm pretty sure that's
Right.
going to be of much value to them as they endeavor on their journey. Let me ask you this, Victor, because you mentioned at the top of the show, largest franchise owner of Planet Fitness. I'm curious about something. Exercise is clearly a very big, important part of your life. How do you maintain your mental health?
I'm glad you asked because, quite frankly, I was unbalanced. Thinking in terms of that, and it's JohnWBrickFoundation.org. I'm sorry, not .com. JohnWBrickFoundation.org.
Got it.
You got to think of things in terms of yin and yang. You got to think in terms of that symbol. And I was so over-focused on the yang, the weights, the cardio, the sports activities. And I have completely shifted to where I now actually am more towards the yin, which is the softer, the water, the yang's fire. The yin, I've got a big 5 I do every day. 1, I do Qigong or yoga. 2, I do some type of strength training every day, or not strength, some type of traditional fitness training, cardio, strength, whatever. 3, I take cold showers according to Wim Hof. I do the cold showers or the cold baths. You familiar with Wim Hof and the Iceman and his philosophy of exposing yourself to extreme ranges of temperature to help it adjust to stress? Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I'm familiar.
Yeah. So I take the cold showers. And then 4 is I do the deep breathing, which is also Wim Hof advocate. I do deep breathing and hold my breath regularly. And then 5 is I take infrared sauna. And you'd be amazed how easy it is to install an infrared sauna in your home or your condo. They're not that expensive and they fit the size of a closet. So I've got the Qigong and the yoga for the mind and the restorative. And I've got the traditional exercise for the body, keeping my body shape. Of course, yoga does that too. The cold showers and the deep breathing helps put me in positive stress. And we don't have enough time for me to go into everything I'd like to go into. But one of the most important things in life is positive stress. For you to improve in anything, I'm talking about music, I'm talking about art, I'm talking about sports, I'm talking about weight, size of your muscles, I'm talking about mental health. You have to be under positive stress. Too little stress, you get no improvement, which is what medication does, by the way. It takes you out of stress entirely. So my brother would be just a zombie when they've done the drugs. Too much stress, and you get fearful, you get anxious, you get frustrated, you want to quit. This positive stress helps you basically become stronger and better. So those 2 things. And then the infrared is actually rejuvenates, and it also helps eliminate pathogens in the body. And it's one of the most, you should look up the benefits of infrared. It's just unbelievable. But if I get those big 5 in, I've had a hell of a day. And I don't always get them in, but I try. And like I said, people just need to make a commitment to their health and well-being and make sure that it's balanced. It's got to be balanced. Too much of one type of activity could be worse than no activity.
Balance is definitely important when we're talking about mental health. I want to ask you this because I know we don't have too much time. I want to say thank you again for coming on the Beyond Theory podcast. I wanted to ask you about the Never Alone Summit. I watched that a few weeks ago. Very moving, very great content. You collaborated with Deepak Chopra and many other clinicians and advocates for mental health. Kind of talk about that experience working with Deepak and everything else.
Well, remember, one of our 3 focuses is collaboration. And this was collaboration with one of the leaders in the field of self-awareness and mindfulness, and that is, of course, Deepak Chopra. So the John W. Mental Health Foundation collaborated with the Never Alone initiative of the Chopra Foundation to present a online podcast, which involves some of the leading proponents of mindfulness and mental health, with Dr. Jerry Boddicker, who's one of the leading psychiatrists in the world, and we had Deepak, and then myself were on, and we had Russell Wilson, who talked about his experience as a professional athlete, and Jewel, who was a singer, and Russell and Brand, the comedian, and there are two things that affect mental health the most. The two things that affect mental health the most. For good mental health, you need connectivity and you need coping skills. On the reverse side of that, the two things that cause mental health issues the most are loneliness and lack of coping skills. So connectivity helps, loneliness hurts, coping skills helps, lack of coping skills hurts. The two main things. The Never Alone Summit, what did COVID do? Put us in isolation, so we were totally alone. And it removed us from a lot of our lifeline, with that being our family, our friends, but also fitness, our gyms, our therapists sometimes. And most people do not have coping skills on their own. So because of the loneliness and the lack of coping skills exacerbated by COVID, there has never been more issues with mental health worldwide. They call it the second pandemic. They call it the parallel pandemic, mental health. And so we wanted to make sure that people understood. Remember what I said, loneliness, biggest cause of mental health issues. We wanted to make sure people understood you are not alone, hence the term, the Never Alone Summit. And we intend to do a series of these because they've been so successful. People need to know that they are not alone and that there are other people that are suffering the same things they are. But at the same time, they also need to know, well, that's great, but what can we do about it? And that's the big thing. That's where this report comes in. That's where we've got to get people accepting and acknowledging the fact that there's a lot you can do about it above and beyond just getting medicated. And remember, getting out of the positive stress. Taking a good hard hike in the forest is stressful in terms of exertion in the body, but it's positive stress and can do wonders. A serious exercise bout is the equivalent, and I say serious, an intense bout of exercise is the equivalent of an entry-level dose of Zoloft. So this concept that, I've got mental health issues, I got to lighten up, I just got to do light walking, I'm going to go out and walk my dog leisurely. Sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes you've got to step it up a little bit. Sometimes you've got to go into what I call the twilight zone and get the release of endorphins and get that feeling of a good hard sweat and get that enjoyment you get when you're breathing hard out in nature and just having to focus on exactly what you're doing, not all the troubles and problems that are weighing you down. So that's all part of the Never Alone Summit. And we've done two now, and we intend, both with the Chopra Foundation, with the Never Alone Initiative, and we intend to continue, and I'm hoping that we can do more of these. And then, like I said, bring people into the sphere of the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation and of salutogenic processes in the treatment of mental health, so that they take more responsibility on their own for self-care and begin to do things like look at the Move Your Mental Health report, begin to talk to other practitioners or therapists that advocate this and demand this as part of their treatment.
Our listeners will remember that we had Dr. David Hanscom on the Beyond Theory podcast, and he talked about one of the big stressors or that kind of leads to chronic pain is that isolation. And you talked about the second pandemic it just reminded me of that. I'm pretty sure our listeners are reminded of that as well, is that isolation is a critical piece.
It's the critical piece.
Right.
It's the biggest. But here's the thing, Dominic, you can be alone in a crowd. You know that. I guarantee you there have been times when you felt alone in a crowd. Maybe it was nothing more than a relative's wedding. You didn't know anybody.
Right.
but and so you have to have coping skills, and you have to understand you're not different and you're not strange, and that it's a challenge at some point in time everyone will face. At some point in time, everyone in their life will have mental health issues. Will it be mental illness? Hopefully not. but they will face mental health issues, often due to loneliness. I could go into the science of all this and I have to talk for hours and hours.
As we wrap up, just want to say thank you again for coming on the Beyond Theory podcast. Victor, really appreciate your time. If you could leave our listeners with a piece of advice, what would that be?
The piece of advice would be to not stumble on rocks that are behind you. Don't let things that happened in your past define your future. And determine or accept responsibility for your health and well-being in all phases of your life, as well as seeking help from professionals. And it's that yin and the yang. It's most things in life are a balance. And it's a beautiful world. And the most important thing, one of the most important things, is to have a grateful heart every day. Have a grateful heart every day.
Victor Brick is the co-founder of the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation and CEO of Planet Fitness Growth Partners, LLC. Find out more, including details of the report we discussed, at johnwbrickfoundation.org. Beyond Theory is produced and hosted by me, Dominic Lawson. You can discover more, including videos of some of our conversations, at beyondtheory.com. For more information on Meadows Behavioral Healthcare, go to meadowsbh.com. Finally, thank you for listening, and I hope you join us next time for another episode of Beyond Theory.